Welcome to the Pardes channel. Today we explain Leviticus chapter 10 in a clear and simple way, step by step. Okay, so let's dive right into this explainer. We're going to chronologically break down what is, honestly, one of the most shocking and rule-heavy chapters in the entire ancient text. We're keeping it strictly to the simple meaning, the Peshat, walking through the text verse by verse. That way you can truly understand what's happening at this incredibly specific, absolutely crucial moment in the narrative, which is the dedication of the newly built tabernacle.
We are dropping right into the exact moment a high-stakes tragedy strikes the ancient Israelites. To really grasp the gravity of this, you have to put yourself in their shoes for a second. This was supposed to be the most joyous day in Israelite history. Literally, it's the 8th day of the inauguration of the tabernacle in the wilderness of Sinai. Aaron and his sons have just been consecrated as priests. The divine presence has literally just appeared in this spectacular way to all the people. The vibe is peak celebration. But then, immediately, that celebration shatters. We are going to see exactly how a catastrophic mistake establishes the ultimate divine boundaries.
Here's how we'll break this down today. First, we'll look at the strange fire tragedy. Second, the strict rules of mourning. Third, distinguishing between holy and common. Fourth, reclaiming the ritual offerings. Fifth, the sin offering dispute. And finally, number 6, Aaron's defense and resolution. All right, let's jump in. Part 1, the strange fire tragedy. Let's take a look at verses 1 and 2.
Now, what's really fascinating, and honestly terrifying, about this opening section is just how suddenly the narrative shifts, right? We go from this sacred, joyous ritual straight to a literal consequence in the blink of an eye. So Aaron the high priest has 4 sons, and the text zeroes in on the 2 oldest, Nadab and Abihu. The text tells us that Nadab and Abihu take their censers. The Hebrew word here is makta, which are essentially these metal fire pans used for carrying hot coals. They put fire in these pans, they add incense to them, and they present it before the Lord. And this verse vividly, almost shockingly, illustrates the immediate and uncompromising response from the divine. If you visualize the geography of the tabernacle for a second, this fire comes surging out from the Holy of Holies, straight from the presence of the Lord. It strikes them, and they die right there on the spot, right inside the sanctuary. No warning, no second chances.
So, the absolutely crucial point here is understanding exactly what went wrong. The text calls what they offered strange fire. In Hebrew, this is esh zara. Now, the word zara means foreign, unauthorized, or something that is just completely outside the bounds of what was commanded. And we need to be clear here, this isn't some deeply mystical concept. It's actually a very practical violation. The text explicitly says they offered a fire which he had not commanded them. Think about it. They are operating in a system where every single detail, every measurement, every specific procedure of the tabernacle service was meticulously dictated by God. It's like a highly complex machine, so taking the initiative to improvise and offer something completely unauthorized, well, no matter how enthusiastic or well-intentioned they might have felt in the moment, it was a fatal crossing of boundaries.
Moving on to part 2, the strict rules of mourning, which brings us to some immediate, intense damage control.
Okay, so in verse 3, Moses tells Aaron that God must be sanctified by those who approach him. And the Hebrew text gives us this incredibly powerful, really chilling 3-word phrase, Vayidam Aharon. Aaron was silent. He just accepts this terrifying judgment without uttering a single word. It's heavy. Then Moses immediately jumps into logistical commands to handle the aftermath in verses 4 and 5. First, Moses calls Mishael and Elzaphan. These are Aaron's cousins from the Kohathite clan. He orders them to carry the bodies away from the front of the sanctuary and take them completely outside the camp. And there is a super striking detail in the Hebrew text here. It says they carried them out in their tunics, their kudnots. Why does that matter? Well, this simple meaning, the Peshat, shows us that the divine fire consumed their lives, their internal breath basically, but it didn't even burn their holy garments. It was a hyper-precise, targeted divine strike. Then, Moses shifts the burden of grief away from the active priests and onto the general congregation. He orders the whole house of Israel to bewail the burning the Lord had brought about.
Now let's look at verses 6 and 7, where Moses explicitly warns Aaron and his 2 surviving sons, Eleazar and Ithamar. He tells them they absolutely cannot mourn like normal people. In the ancient Near East, standard expressions of profound human grief included uncovering your head, letting your hair go loose and unkempt, and physically tearing your clothes. Moses tells them point blank, if you do this, you will die too, and God's anger will strike the entire community. You might be wondering, why are these rules so intensely strict?
Well, the practical logic here is that these priests have the anointing oil of the Lord upon them. They are currently acting as the physical representatives of the divine presence, which is the ultimate source of life. Therefore, they literally cannot associate themselves with the rituals of death, not even for their own brothers and sons. They're even forbidden from leaving the tent of meeting. The sanctuary must continue to function. It doesn't stop for personal tragedy.
Part 3. Distinguishing holy and common. This is where a permanent law is established.
Moving right into verses 8 and 9, the tension shifts a bit. For the very first time in this entire narrative sequence, God bypasses Moses entirely and speaks directly to Aaron. You know, this direct communication might actually be a profound sign of divine comfort right after Aaron's agonizing silence. God lays down a permanent law for all future generations. Priests absolutely cannot drink wine or intoxicating drink when entering the tent of meeting. Now, because this command comes immediately on the heels of the deaths of Nadab and Abihu, a lot of classical commentators look at the simple context and observe that, hey, maybe Nadab and Abihu were actually intoxicated when they brought that Esh Zarah. We don't know for sure, but either way, this practical ban ensures the priests remain completely sharp. It guarantees they maintain the absolute clarity of mind required to avoid another fatal error like the one we just saw.
And this brings us to an incredible educational moment in verses 10 and 11. It outlines the overarching theme of the entire book of Leviticus, honestly. God tells Aaron that he and the priests must distinguish between two sets of fundamental coordinates. First, between the holy, which in Hebrew is Kadosh, and the common, which is Chol. Kadosh means it's set apart entirely for the divine, while Chol is just the ordinary everyday world. Second, they have to distinguish between the clean, tahor, meaning ritually pure and permitted to interact with the sacred, and the unclean, tameh, meaning ritually impure. And the priests are commanded to teach all these decrees to the Israelites. So the sanctuary is a realm of absolute precision. You literally cannot blur the lines between Kadosh and Chol, or tahor and tameh. Nadab and Abihu blurred a line, and as we saw, it cost them their lives.
Which brings us to part 4, reclaiming the ritual offerings and an attempt to return to normalcy.
In verses 12 through 15, Moses tries to force a return to the day's standard protocol. The trauma is incredibly fresh, obviously, but for the sake of the community, the requirements of the sanctuary have not stopped. So Moses tells Aaron, Eleazar, and Ithamar the exact methodical procedure they need to follow right now. He tells them to take the mincha, that's the grain offering left over from the fire offerings, and eat it without yeast right beside the altar. Why? Because it is most holy. Then they are instructed to eat the breast and thigh portions from the peace offerings in a ceremonially clean place. Moses is basically reiterating to them, look, this is your designated share, you must consume it exactly as God commanded, maintaining the precise ritual machinery that keeps the Israelites in harmony with God. The show must go on, so to speak.
Part 5, the sin offering dispute. Just when you think things are settling down, Moses gets angry.
So in verses 16 through 18, Moses goes checking on the rest of the day's sacrifices. He is diligently looking for the Seir HaChatat, the goat of the sin offering. This was a very specific inaugural sacrifice brought for the entire community, and he makes a really disturbing discovery. It has been completely burned up on the altar. Moses becomes intensely, furiously angry with Eleazar and Ithamar. He scolds them, and he presents an exact theological argument. He says, God gave you this sin offering to eat in this sanctuary area specifically so that you may carry away the guilt of the congregation and make atonement for them. By burning it instead of eating it, the process is incomplete. So as far as Moses is concerned, they've just broken yet another strict rule on a day that is already marred by lethal disobedience. He is not happy.
And finally, part 6, Aaron's defense and resolution. We arrive at verse 19. Now, remember how Aaron was completely silent back in verse 3? Vayadom Aharon? But now when Moses attacks his surviving sons, Aaron steps in and speaks up boldly. He offers Moses this deeply poignant but also deeply logical counterargument based entirely on the text's own rules. He says to Moses, look, the routine daily offerings were brought today, but then this horrific, completely unprecedented tragedy happened to me. Aaron argues that there is a big difference between a regular daily offering and a special, joyous, inaugural offering. He reasons that an ordinary priest who is in deep, immediate mourning simply cannot eat holy food. So he asks Moses a very direct rhetorical question. Would the Lord have been pleased if I, a grieving father, whose sons just died before God, had eaten this joyous sin offering today? It's amazing. He is deploying brilliant legal reasoning right alongside his profound, crushing grief.
Which brings us to verse 20, an incredibly beautiful moment of resolution. Moses, the ultimate lawgiver, the guy who was just furious about broken rules seconds ago, actually listens to his older brother's reasoning. And the text simply says he was satisfied. It was well-pleasing in his sight. This shows incredible humility from Moses. He essentially admits, you know what, my own interpretation was actually too rigid in this specific instance. He realizes that Aaron's understanding of the law, which was heavily colored by his immediate, devastating context, was actually the correct one. Aaron wasn't rebelling at all. His choice not to eat was an act of deep reverence for God's holiness and an honest respect for his own overwhelming grief.
So, as we wrap up this explainer, let's talk about the practical life lessons we can take away from this really intense chapter. Like, what do we learn and how can we actually improve ourselves from reading this? Well, first, we learn the absolute importance of boundaries in our own lives, right? Distinguishing between what is sacred and what is ordinary, what is Kadosh and what is Chol. Nadab and Abihu's tragedy teaches us that just having good intentions isn't enough. We have to respect the structure and boundaries that are given to us, rather than just imposing our own ego or our own strange fire onto situations. But equally important is the lesson we get from the very end of the chapter. How do we balance a strict adherence to rules with profound human empathy? Well, Moses shows us that even the greatest leaders must possess the humility to listen, to be corrected, and to realize that genuine human pain matters deeply. True reverence always leaves room for our humanity. Thank you for learning with us. If this helped you understand the chapter better, like, subscribe, and join us for the next chapter.